Okay, good afternoon. So, continuing to talk about how to do basically model checking. And yesterday, what we saw how to model a system. And I think, just to make one thing clear, I told you about different models. Right? If I go back to this green stuff. If I go to this green chart, right? Remember that? Where I had all these atomic actions happening and partly overlapping in time, maybe time goes downwards, partly overlapping over time. And that, what I did is I just drew the line at the beginning, and after any of the atomic action finishes, and then decided to look at what is the global state. So what is the value of each variable at that point, right? So here, since it is in the middle, then I assume that the variables still have the value here. All these points, if you think this is difficult, or this is something that confuses you, this is just philosophical. Okay? This is just intuition of the connection between what actually happened and the model, which is an interleaving model. It looks at the global states. It looks at the assignment to the variables, all the variables of all the processes at global states, and it assumes that between every two global states, I pick up a transition, an atomic transition, and execute. Right? What I try to do is I try to motivate to you the connection between how things happen in real life, where there's some duration and some overlapping perhaps between actions, and the model. I try to reason about the model. This is not something that I said I would ask you in an exam, right? This is just for your intuition. Okay? This is just for you to kind of try to convince you that this model is intuitive. It represents in the way which kind of is based on this relationship between the actual execution and these global states. It represents concurrent system in a way that kind of preserve my intuition. And from experience, I could say that this model, which is a very simple model, is good enough to represent almost anything that you want about concurrent systems. Only very few cases that say you really want to say that, look, the increment of R1 and the increment of R2 are overlapping or concurrent or independent, right? If you want to say that, then you lose that information in my model, in the interleaving model, right? So in that case, maybe you want the more detailed model. If you want to say that the increment of R1 finished 3 microseconds before the increment of R2, you lose that information, okay? Or something about the duration. My model does not include time, okay? There are systems that you want to say something about time. Then your model might be different, okay? So the only point about this is that I just try to let you see why this model intuitively represents the behavior and why I'm going to use that model. So from now on, we'll forget about all this structure, we'll forget about it and just stick to this interleaving model, okay? So don't be worried about this complication. In fact, it's just kind of philosophical, I mean, how the system actually behaves, and as it is a model, the way we perceive it. I mean, as far as we know, it behaves something like that, and it is sufficient in some sense to look at the global states. Okay? So from now on, we'll have that model. That's an important point, right? So I wanted to make sure that you understand that this is not to complicate you. This is not something that you can ask you in an exam, right? What happened? I mean, what really happened? Is it like these things happen concurrently, overlapping? It's not important, just that you believe in the model. And I do that because when I first studied this area many years ago, I had difficulty in trusting that model. People said, the interleaving model, it represents the execution. And they said, what happened if things overlap? But then, that was probably before each one of you were born, except for maybe then there were no concurrent processors. I mean, if you wanted to program something concurrently, there was one processor and the operating system would swap in and out the processors. So things really happen in an interleaving way. Now, you really have concurrency and overlapping, okay? But still, that model of interleaving that kind of comes from multi-programming model, then is still simple and it describes almost everything that you want. Okay, so if we understood that, we talked about the transition system model, which again had the advantage that is very simple, right? So what I want to do is I want to simplify. I want to have very simple principles that kind of would be intuitive and easy to handle. And the interleaving model, do you remember what it has, what component I had? Like I take a program on the left, and what does the interleaving model consist? What are the components? Because I want you to interact. And I have to say that yesterday, everybody that raised his hand or spoke said something smart and was great. So you shouldn't be shy. So what do I have? I have transitions, right? What else do I have?
State.
States, right.
Sequence of states.
Sorry?
Sequence of states.
Sequence of states. These are the executions, right? Okay. States. Sequence of states. What else? What are states consist of? States. What do states consist of? State. What is a state? Sorry? Variables. Okay. So for having states, I have variables, And what do I have to do with the variables? What is a state? Is, I hear something correct. Is an assignment. Assignment of values to variables. Okay? And what else do I need? So if I have states, I have okay, I have variables, I have states, I have the transitions. The execution would be kind of come up from the transition from the interleaving model. But what is the last thing that you can see on the slide? What do I need more? Sorry? But you said the right thing. I just have to just say stronger. What do I have? What's called initial condition, right? And that's my goal. Okay. So we understand that. And then we talked about the state space, which are all the possible states of the program. And then we talked about the state graph, which is a graph consisting of all the reachable states, not necessarily every state of the program, every state in the state space has to be reachable, right? And this is not a problem. This is actually good, right? Because in this case, I did not want any state in which I'm in the critical section in both processes at the same time. Okay? And how do I generate the state graph? I start from initial state satisfying the initial condition, and I apply depth first search, generate successor states, etc., and I do that now. Then we talked about the fact that we can model things in different ways. If you remember, I had this busy waiting model here, right? So an alternative model where I had also a transition which checks whether I have the turn, and if not, I just do nothing, but it does still the cycle. So I do execute that transition, although it's not that changed my model. Okay? And in that model, I have some executions, some sequences which do not progress. They get stuck somehow, and we talked about the fact that it's not fair, and we would need later to kind of adjust our model in order to take care of it. Okay? So this is what we did yesterday, and we finished by saying that the main problem in automatic verification of systems is what is called the state space explosion. It's a combinatorial explosion. If every process has only, say, 3 states, and I have n processes, then I have 3 to the power of n states. Okay? And that's a lot of processes. So if I have like 100 processors, then 3 to the power of 100 is something that probably I'm not capable of storing all the states just one by one. I cannot enumerate them. So I would need some methods in order to do the verification that do not construct the state graph directly, but maybe do some kind of shortcuts. That would give you motivation that there's all kinds of interesting things. So if you remember that, we can go on. And in the book, for whoever has the book, and that corresponds to chapter 5. So what I want is, I want a formalism. Okay? I want a specification formalism that would be exact. Right? So for formal methods, it's not enough to use natural language. Right? So if I look at a specification document, that's not a specification. I really want to write something in a way that has a unique semantics. Whoever looks at it has only one interpretation. Okay? And for that, I want a standard notation, something that a lot of people would understand, a lot of people would accept that this is the way to write specification. Now, it is a problem about standards, because if you say you go to industry, people don't really like this kind of standard. They really, they say, okay, someone told me to develop a system and he gave me a book. And now you ask me to be a logician and to write something in logic. But there are standards. And the first standard that we will learn, linear topologic, it's almost a standard because there are different versions of linear topologic. But there's also a standard. There's a book by a committee. There's always a form by a committee. which is the standard linear temporal logic. It's called PSL. And it tells you exactly how to write specification. Okay? So, again, we saw what the transition system is a bit of a term. And let's go to linear temporal logic. So I assume all of you know logic. I'm sure all of you know some logic, at least proposition logic. Okay? That's the logic with conjunction, disjunction, and or, negation. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to expand it, and I'm going to add operators which apply to time. So proposition logic, it's very static, right? So I have proposition. Proposition has a value, like a state is a mapping there, which maps a Boolean value to each proposition variable. And the proposition variable could be true or false. Okay, I'm either here or in the next room. I cannot be I mean, I cannot be in both places. So, sorry, I'm either here or not in that room, right? So this is simple, but it describes something static, right? If I want to say that currently I'm here, and in 2 time units I'm not here, okay? Then I cannot say that with proposition logic, right? Because the proposition variable, which says that I'm here, either is true or false, right? But you want to say something about time. So in order to expand it with time operators, I introduce some these temporal operators or time operators. This thing, which looks like a box. So usually it's written as a box, not as this combination. But not a lot of keyboards have a box. So this is a box. This is diamond, and that's a circle. Okay? And these are temporal operators. If you add them to the proposition logic, they would talk about time. You can combine them with proposition logic, and then you could, the propositions, depending on these operators, would say different things, would have different values in different time units, or different states, okay? Which is really nice, because an execution is a sequence of states, right? And now I want to say something about my execution. So a proposition could say something holds in a state or doesn't hold in a state, but if I also allow these temporal operators, then you could say that it would happen in a later state, in the next state, in all the possible states that would follow, etc., etc. These are the kind of things I want to say. So, the first operator, which is called box, has other names. One name is always, and another name is forever. It should be intuitive. And what it means is that if I say box 5, then 5, instead of being true now, it is also true in the next state, in the next state, in the next, all the time, forever. Okay? So this is box or always. In particular, it also means that 5 holds now, right? So that different version will have a version that if something holds forever or box 5, then also it means that 5 holds now. Now the next. Now notice that my logic does not talk about actually about clocks. Okay, when it says next time or always, it refers to states. It does not refer to in 2 seconds or to. I mean, whatever, you know, it could be that every step, every state would happen within 2 microseconds. I don't know, but I don't care. Because at this point, I abstract away the time. Okay? It doesn't mean that I always abstract away the time. There are systems where timing is important, real-time systems. It's important, right? So you may want a logic which also combines time. But at this point, we don't use it. If I said that the model I showed you, the living model, is good, I would say 99% of the time, then not requiring to say anything about the time maybe is good in 95%. But in our case, it's not required. So this is box. It means always. Diamond. it's kind of, I would say, the dual of box. If it says in all the states from now on, always starts now and says from now on, it says there would be a state. So from now on, if I look at all the states, there would be some time where phi would be true. So you can either call it diamond or eventually or sometimes in the future if you like. Okay? Let's say if I'm at some point in the sequence and I look at all the states from now, there would be a state where phi would be true. And this one is next time. It means in the next state. Okay? And this is a bit more complicated. I'll show you now drawings which would make everything more intuitive. So here's like a picture, and each one of these yellow things corresponds to a sequence, a sequence of states. And I made it finite for, because the screen is finite, but let's assume even that it is infinite. And this kind of tries to depict the semantics of box. So box phi means from now in every possible state. So you see every possible state has to satisfy phi. Okay? In fact, to be more precise, you should have said phi holds from every possible state, not in every possible state, because phi itself can also talk about the future states. Okay? I can combine them. Eventually, phi means phi holds at some future state. It could happen immediately now. The present in this logic is always part of the future. Okay? If it holds now, then eventually phi. It could hold now and eventually phi will be satisfied. But it doesn't have to hold now, at least it holds at some time. It doesn't say that it doesn't hold twice. It just says what it says. It holds at some point in the future. Okay? Next on phi means that phi holds in the next state. If I wanted time, I would possibly put some indexes here with some notation that corresponds to time. Next time, when t is 2 microseconds more than now, that I don't do. Now, this operator, which is called until, is a bit more complicated, so you need to pay attention. What it says that, well, we call it until, so we read it phi until psi, and it says that at some point, psi holds. And until that point, phi has to hold. So if psi didn't hold in all these states, then phi has to hold. Okay? Now again, it says things in a positive way. So it says, first of all, it says psi has to hold. It cannot be that, well, it never happens, but phi holds all the time. No, it really says phi has to hold. And it says if psi didn't hold, then phi has to hold in all the states until this happens. It does not say that, for example, that phi cannot hold here. Okay, it says things on the positive. Until the first time that psi holds, phi has to hold. It could be that phi holds as well. Phi can continue. Now at this state could be that neither phi nor psi holds, or that psi holds again. Okay, what I didn't require could be anything. Okay, the important thing says phi until psi. Now, if you look at that, already probably you're puzzled. I mean, some people, when they see that, then they have an intuition that something is redundant. Right? I mean, I don't really need all of these. There's too many things here. Right? I mean, and the simplest thing would be to get rid of one of the operators. So one of the operators I can get rid of and express it using another. And to give you a hint how I do that, I can replace, to do that, I'll use true instead of one of the phi's or psi's. True holds always, right? So how do I get rid of one of the operators? Which one is redundant? Which one you can get rid of? let's see, I'll give you a hint. I can get rid of this one. I don't need that. How do I get rid of it? How I express eventually 5 using another operator? Anyone? Anyone has an idea? So I want to write that using another operator. Sorry? It's almost true. Okay, so the correct thing would be that I use until, and I use until 5. Okay, but the not part is not, it's almost true, okay? But, okay, I gave that hint, very good, that was very good. So instead of writing eventually 5, what this says is that 5 happens at some point, right? Now this says that psi happens at some point, and until that point, phi happens. So if I wrote here instead of phi, of psi, I wrote phi, and here I wrote true. I would write true until phi. It means that phi has to hold at some point, and until that point, as long as it doesn't hold, then true holds. True holds always, right? So instead of eventually phi, I can write true until phi. So this is redundant. Why I added that? Because in many cases I don't need that. But I don't want to write true until phi instead of that, because that would kind of make things more complicated than they should, right? This is what we call in programming language syntactic sugar. We have different ways of saying the same things, but we still keep both of them because sometimes it's more intuitive reason. Okay? So this means that this is redundant. Actually, there's another one which is redundant, any idea? It's more difficult. Can someone guess which one is redundant? Sorry? Right. Yes. Very good. Very good. So I think you didn't only answer me, you also explained to me why. So that you also proved to me why. Oh, it's me. So let me go slower. So the box is redundant, as we said, and why. So let me go slower, okay? So as I said, instead of eventually P, I can write true until P, right? Don't you agree? See that? And as she said, you don't need the box, and she already figured out the thing about the not. So instead of box P, I could write not, diamond not P. It looks a bit confusing. I know that initially it should, right? But the point is the following. Let's think about it in this way. If I want to write, let's suppose that I write not box 5. What does it mean not box 5? What does it mean not box 5? Sorry? It means phi is always false. There's no, phi never happens, right? In every not box phi, it means that there is a state where phi does not hold. It's not true that in every state phi is true. It means that there is a state where phi is not true. The negation of this, not box phi, right? Negation of box phi, not box phi, means there is at least one state where phi is not true. Okay? Now let me negate that. But in a different way. If I say here, diamond not phi, what does it mean? There is a state where not phi is true, right? But not box phi equals diamond not phi. It's the same thing, right? It's important. These things, I try to do this example and let you think about that because it's important to gain an intuition. Okay? So try to concentrate. not box phi again, not box, I mean box phi means that phi holds in every state, or from every state. If this would not be true, it means at least one of these states not phi, right? So not box phi is one of these states not phi. Now this says at some point phi holds, and if I say eventually not phi, it means at some point phi is not true. And I said twice the same thing. So not box phi equals diamond not phi. It's not the negation of this and the negation of that. It's the negation of this formula, and here it's the negation which is inside. It's diamond not phi. Okay? You have to think here. This is important. I do this part slowly, and I try to give you an example, but you should develop intuition. Okay? If you didn't so far, you get it. Okay? Don't worry about it. And if you don't get it, then there's a break, and then you can ask. Okay? So basically, if not box P is the same as diamond not P, then box P is the same as not diamond not. Okay? So if not this thing is that, and this thing is not that. This is physics. And if I knew how to eliminate the eventually, right? I replaced the eventually with until, and now I could replace the box with eventually, then I could take that eventually and replace it with until, and I get that property. Right? So I don't need that. I can write it with until. I don't need that. I can write this with eventually, and that I can write with until. I just need the eventually, and the next time I need to. So from all my great picture, I need only that operator and that operator. It can be shown that I cannot get rid of additional one. I still need these two operators, but there are many of them. I really need both. Okay, now let me talk about combination. The nice thing about temporal logic is it doesn't just tell you, well, always something or eventually something. It will tell you how things progress in time. Okay? And as I said, you will notice that I said always P means in every state P, and then I kind of corrected myself and I said always phi means phi starts in every state. Why starts? Because phi itself could be temporal. So I can make a combination. Say always eventually P. What does it mean always eventually P? It means in every state eventually P. Okay? Always eventually P means I'm here now in a state. Let's suppose that each one of my steps is a state, and eventually P. Okay? It means that from now, if I look forward, there would be a state where P holds. Let me walk into that state. Okay, now P holds. Now, if I look at that state where P holds, let me make another step. I don't know if P holds now or not, but I know from every state eventually P. So let me go to that state. Now P holds again. Let me go to the next state. I do that because the problem eventually P, if P happens now, then eventually P. I want to say something about more and more P's, right? So I go to the next. And eventually P holds again. So what does it mean? It means that P happens infinitely many times. Each time it would happen again, and later it would also happen again. From every state, right? Assuming that the execution is infinite, from every state it would happen again and again. Okay? And if I look at eventually always P, it means now again at the beginning of my execution, and I go to the state in which always P. So P holds now, and now, and now, and now. And that says that P holds not only infinitely many times, but at some point it starts to hold and never ceases. Or you can think about it in a different way. there's only finitely many states in which P may not hold, right? After finitely many states, I'm going to, at some point, go to the place where P holds play. Okay? Are we okay with that? Is that complicated? If I need to stall, am I going to slow? Maybe. Okay? And then I can combine it more. Like I could say, always eventually P implies always eventually Q. Okay? And you can think about it. This looks like a very complicated property, but really what it says is, if P happens infinitely many times, then Q happens infinitely many times. For example, if you go back, remember this execution that I allowed this busy waiting, where I checked, is it my turn, is it my turn, and maybe I just, the guy who's checking, is it my turn, he will take all the cycles, and the other guy, really it's his turn, but he doesn't get the chance, and this is not fair, right? So this is the kind of property where I can express fairness. I can assume that if infinitely often a process can do something, then infinitely often it will be chosen to do the next action, take the next position. Right? So this is exactly a property, but we'll go back later to we call it fairness. Okay, so now I really need your participation. Now I'm not going to continue unless you answer it. Right? And you can think, and if you make a mistake, it's not a problem. I need answers. Okay. So I want to, just to get intuition, I want to ask you about relationships between objects. So this says that in every state, both phi and psi holds, and this says that in every state phi holds, and in every state psi holds. And now I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, whoever think that these are equivalent. Whoever think that these are equivalent should raise your hand. Okay, so whoever thinks that this is not equivalent. Whoever thinks. No, you have to choose, okay? I mean, it's not a problem. Suppose you make a mistake. Let's go again. Whoever thinks this is correct. These are equivalent. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 3 brave people. That's it. What do you think? It's equivalent or not?
It's a friend.
Hmm?
I think it's a friend.
You think it is?
It holds.
It holds. Okay. What do you think? What do you think? It's false? It holds. Okay. Who think it doesn't hold? Nobody thinks it doesn't hold. Okay. So it holds. This is correct. This is correct. And why is it correct? This, I mean, semantically, if you think what it means, the left side says in every state I know that phi is true and psi is true, right? The second says separately, in every state phi is true, and in every state psi is true. Then both of them are true. Right? It's not a proof, but intuitively we know this is true. Now we get to the other thing. It says eventually there is a state in the future where phi is true and psi is true. And this says eventually phi is true and eventually psi is true. And I wrote here that this is not equivalent. Okay? So it's not equivalent, but I claim that there is a implication for one side. One side implies the other. Okay? If one of the side is true, then the other side is true. So it could be left to right or right to left. And then we get to the hands again, and I hope now we kind of are more secure. So who thinks that if eventually phi and psi holds, then eventually phi holds and eventually psi holds? Okay, there are more people now. That's good. We will get it here. More people are secure. They think that is true. And who thinks that eventually phi, if eventually phi is true, and eventually psi is true, then eventually phi and psi are true. We think nobody thinks that. Okay? So, in order to show that one side is correct or another, I need kind of, we can prove it, but intuitively I would say that it's true that if there is a state where phi is true and psi is true in the future, then there is a state in the future, that state where phi is true, and there's also a state in the future, that same state where psi is true. And therefore there's this implication. So the implication from left to right is true, but to show the implication, that the implication from right to left is not true, I'll show you a counterexample. And the counterexample or the intuition would be that it could be that phi holds in one state, psi holds in a different state, but not in the same. Okay? We're good? Okay. We're getting better with the participation, maybe like 5-7 hours, or some live participation here. But please, okay, let's see. So here I wrote that eventually phi of psi is the same as eventually phi or eventually psi, which means if there is a state in the future where I know that either phi of psi is true, then either I know that eventually phi is true, or I know that psi is true. It's the same. But this is not the same. This says always phi of psi. In every state, either phi of psi. In this state, either in every state phi or in every state psi. It's not the same because I wrote that, but one direction is stronger. It implies the other direction. Can you say which direction? Left to right, right to left? The thing is, if you do it with the finger like that, then I don't know because I'm in reverse to you. So I'm not sure what you do. I think you mean right to left. Yeah? You mean right to left and you're right. Okay? So, left? No. Right to left, yes. Right to left, and that's true, right? If I know that phi holds in all the states, or I know that psi holds in all the states, and in every state, one of them has to hold. In fact, in particular, there will be one that holds in every state. Okay? But for the other direction, we showed the counter example. What happens is that in every state, this holds. So in every state, I have either phi of psi, but neither phi holds in all the states. So here, phi doesn't hold. Nor psi holds in all the states. Here, psi doesn't hold. Right? We're trying to go slowly. Now we're a bit more complicated. The question is, and I understand that the people in the first two lines, they kind of are more secure. Right? That's why they stood in the first two lines. And the people in the last line, I don't see so many handwriting, and that's a bit of a pity. So if you're not going to wave your hand, I'm going to go directly to one of you and ask, right? So you have to participate, okay? Except for the people that sleep. You can sleep and hopefully I'm okay. If I know that always eventually phi and always eventually psi. So remember, this means infinitely many times phi holds and infinitely many times psi holds. Does it mean that infinitely many times both phi and psi hold? Again, the people in the first rows. I mean, what's happening? Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, so why don't you raise your hand? You know, right? There you go. Okay. So I would claim, did I lose my mic? No, because I'm here. It's okay. I claim that there's an implication, and I'm going to catch someone else. It's you. So in which direction I have implication? From left to right, or from right to left? From right to left. So saying if infinitely many times I have both phi psi, same state, then I have infinitely many times phi and infinitely many times psi. So those in the dark lines, they know at least as well as those in the front lines. And that, no, I did this already. Yes, sorry, I think I just pressed the button. So now the moral of this is that you have to participate in the back lines, at least until the line 4, perfectly know. So, if this is true, if infinitely many times both of these things hold, then each one of them happened infinitely many times. And on the other hand, that is not guaranteed. I mean, from left to right is not guaranteed. Oh. Okay, this is true too. What about this? This says if at some point phi becomes true, and at some point psi becomes true, both forever, isn't the same thing as at some point both of them become true? Saying yes, is the same? Okay. I even see someone from the 6th line nodding yes. Very good. And the last one? Last one? We'll think about it a bit more. Okay. Usually, in order to explain how logic works, I need semantics, right? There's syntax and semantics. So there is a kind of a formal way to give semantics. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I'm just going to show you just for reference. So how am I going to interpret the logic? So I have a model or a structure, and my model is a sequence of states. It's going to be infinite sequence, okay? And that's sigma. And I would denote by sigma superscript I the suffix of sigma starting from the state I. So the entire sequence would start from 0. Sigma would be sigma 0. And sigma I would start from Si. Si plus 1, etc. And now I can interpret things like sigma I satisfy P. P is a proposition. Means that P holds in that state. So I'll have to assign a truth value for every proposition in every state. I have to decide for every proposition if it's true in a state or not. The proposition would say, for example, that the program counter is at L0. So in every state I could check if it's true or not. It should have like a Boolean value, true, false. But at every state the proposition would have a value. And conjunction, and you know that, right? It means that both phi and psi hold in that state. Disjunction is an OR. Negation, you already know. These are just propositional logic. And that says eventually phi, and that corresponds to, it means that this is a suffix, right? This is a recursive definition, and this is a suffix starting from the state J. And that means there is a later state, so sorry, state I, there's a J which is bigger or equal than I, where phi holds. Yes, that's for every J bigger or equal than I, phi holds. So this is our constant definition. This is the definition of an until. You can look at it as all this. Yeah, too detailed to do. And now, you know, it's important to say that I interpret a proposition. Each proposition is true or false in every state. I interpret the propositions over the states, say, of the program, and I can interpret a formula over a sequence. And also, I could say that a program satisfies a formula if every one of its sequences, if every one of its executions satisfy the formula. So I make this generalization. If I want to say that the sequence and execution satisfy a formula, then this is according to that semantics. But if I say a program satisfies a formula, then I have to interpret the formula over each one of the sequences. And let's go into this very simple example. So I have some strings, okay, here are my strings, and the strings work in the following way. The first, when I start initially, then the string is not expanded. I'm not applying any force on it, and then I can wind the string or try to expand it or pull it, okay? And after I pull it, I release it. Now, you know, some strings are really, I pull, and at some point, I cannot release it anymore, right? They lose their elastic properties, okay? So here we have a choice. So when I apply a pull, it goes to that state, and when I apply a release, it either decides to be a nice string that returns to original situation, or it's a bad string. And it goes here, and then it remains, whatever I do, it remains here because after a string is dead, then it's dead. Okay? So this is my model. And so my executions are just sequences of states starting with the initial state S1. The initial state always has an incoming edge. And these are the possible executions. So I have to go according to the graph. This one is a good execution because S1, S2, S2, S1, S2 forever, right? This is the perfect string. I can do it forever. Okay? And all the rest is a finite number of times that I do that, and then they go to S3. Say after the first time or the second time that I pull it, and then they remain there. Okay? This is not necessarily the only or the best model for a string, but that would do, okay? Because I want to say something about that string. Now, in order to interpret the temporal property over that string, then I use propositions, right? So in order to say something about my program, which is a string, I use proposition. I have two propositions. One proposition says whether the string is extended or not. So here it's not extended, here it's extended, and here it's extended. And the other proposition says whether it's no function, whether it's lost its elasticity. Okay? So here it's lost, and here it's not. And it's not a correct model because you may argue that in fact it decides here whether it's lost or not. But this is my model. Okay? And now I want to say things about the string, and I want to see what goes on. So as we saw before, a few slides ago, I have to interpret a temporal property over a sequence, right? Over a model. And the model is a sequence of states. Okay? And later I would interpret the property over the program. So I would say what happened to all the sequences. These would be the properties of a string. But now it's a property of a single sequence. So let's see. Is it true that this sequence R2, this slide always refers to R2, satisfy extended? And again, these are the propositions: extended, and malfunction, and in every state I wrote. Here it's not extended and not malfunction. Here it's extended and not malfunction. Here it's extended and malfunction. So you know how to interpret the propositions to each state, in each state. And now you want to see how you interpret the formula. So this is a simple temporal formula that just says extended. Okay? And just to start up, I would not ask you that, but I will tell you that according to the semantics, if I have here a proposition, okay, or a formula that does not include any temporal operators like circle, diamond, box, then I interpret, according to the semantics I showed before, I interpret the proposition over the first state of the sequence. So this refers to the first state of R2 satisfies the extended. So first state is S1. Is it extended? No. You have to speak up, please. You know, I want to hear you. But I say no. It's okay, you know, but please help me because I want to be reassured that you understand me. Okay, so please help me speak up. Now, what does this mean? It means in the next state, or the second state of R2 sequence, it's extended. Is it true or not? True. It's true. This says in the next state of the third state, is it extended? In R2. This is the first, second, third. Is it extended? No. Eventually extended. Is it? Yeah, because eventually I get to that state and it's extended. Always extended? Very good, I like it. And this says eventually always extended. At some point it remains extended. Very good. And this is not eventually always extended. No. If this was yes, then this is no, right? It's the negation. You see that this is not necessarily true for a program. This is good for a sequence. Okay? So not eventually always actually is equivalent to eventually always not. Very good. That says not extended until malfunction. It's not true, right? Because it could be extended, it's still not malfunction, right? So it could be, there could be a state before it is malfunction where it is extended. This says in every state, if it's not extended, the next time it is extended. Yeah? Very good. Now this is interpreting the formula over a sequence, and I have a book. So we have a great time. The right hand part to hold the center. Since it's never true, this is equivalent. But there's another property which is called release. Next week, not this week. We should do this release. That's what I mean, it could be that I have to look at the reason for没有开空调吗？对啊。最近老嘛，我昨天刚刚打电话给对方，现在主要是就是看房价那么长，但是要搬到上面，20来万这种车，20来万这种车换到但是老点单也是好贵的，你帮我留一个，帮我盯着。接受了。
我作业到第2次。
他们还有微信吗？
You answer me. Who thinks I'm going too fast? Please raise your hand. Who thinks I'm going too slow? No, please raise hands. Except for one guy. If you think well, that will help because I'll go faster. Seriously, I'm not insulted if I'm going too slow. Who thinks I'm going too slow? Because if you're not raising hands, except for one guy, I'm going to go the same pace. Okay? Nobody says I'm going too fast. Also, okay? Same pace. Okay? Very same pace. Okay. Let's go back to this example. I just edited it a bit. That point here, I wanted just to say, I asked you whether in R2, it was true that eventually always extended. Right? At some point, it's becoming extended because it's a faulty execution, and you said this is true. When I asked you if it's not true, actually, I could have written it in this way. This is equivalent, if you think about it. So whenever I have a box, I could just, if I have not box, I could just push the negation inside and make it a line and vice versa. So this is equivalent. Instead of saying not eventually always extended, I could say always eventually not extended. That was the way I transformed a box to diamond and vice versa. So it would be more intuitive to say that this property says that always eventually not extended. And this is not true, right? This was true and this was not true, right? That would say that it's a good spring, but it's not a good spring because that would mean that there would be infinitely many times where it's not extended, right? So it goes back infinitely many times, right? But that's important that you understand the intuition, because now we have this slide which asks exactly the same questions, but this time it asks whether P satisfies it. So P means the program or the system. Now I have to ask, now what I want to ask you is whether all the executions satisfy it. So if you look at all the executions, are all of them satisfying extended? As you remember, it means in all the execution extended, the proposition extended is true in the first state. Is it true? No, right? In fact, in all of them start from here, which is not extended. So if I write not extended, that would be true in all the execution. How about in the second state of all the execution? Is it extended? Yes, it's true. I'm very happy the participation here is increasing exponentially. And I expect that next week we're going to disturb the people that study this book. Okay. So, next time. The third state is extended in all the executions? No. No, it's not in all the execution. In some of them it is, right? So, next time, extended, right? It's actually one of them. The rest is not, right? It's not in all the execution. Very good. Eventually extended in all the execution, at some point it extended? Yeah. Yes. Right? In particular, in the second state of every execution, right? We're good. I think we understand temporal logic, right? I'm very happy. And always extended, all executions always extended? No, in particular, the first state of every execution is not, right? Now is the trick question. Surprising. Is it true that in all the execution is going to be eventually always extended? No. Not in all the executions, right? In fact, in how many executions is going not to be true? In one execution. There's only one execution in which it's going to switch between extended and non-extended, right? In almost all of them it's false, but one of them is true. And since this says in all the execution, then even if there's one execution that does not satisfy it, then that means false. Remember before that, we concluded that if this is true for an execution, then the negation is always is automatically false, right? Because negation is negation. But what happens here? It says it has to be true in all the execution. Is it true that in all of the execution, the negation of it is true? And again, to make it more intuitive, because if I look at that formula, I cannot understand myself what it says. Let's think about always eventually not extended. Is that true? In all the executions? Always eventually not extended. Infinitely many times is not extended. Is it true in all the executions? No. How many executions is going to be true? Well, this is true in one execution. This is true in all the rest, right? But because there's one execution satisfying that, and one execution that does not satisfy that, this is not true about all the executions, and this is not true about all the executions. So what we call in logic the law of excluded middle, right? If a property holds, then a negation doesn't hold, is not true when we interpret the formula over temporal properties. Okay? Sorry, if we interpret temporal properties over a property, okay? Which means that a property could be, it could be that the property is false and its negation is false. It couldn't be that the property is true and its negation is true, but both of them could be false because they're false on different executions. Okay? And we're happy with that. Okay, I got here. Okay, so as you know, if we have a logic, then we have a proof system, right? Propositional logic, probably you know how to do proofs in proposition logic, first order logic. So there is a proof system, and usually we look at proof systems which have axioms, right? Here are the axioms, and there's proof rules. There's a proof rule that says if P is true, then always true. This is a proof system that tells you if a property actually is a tautology. Tautology means that it's true for every model, for every sequence. Right? For proposition logic, there are decision procedures. So people seldom use proof rules, right? And this is also true for temporal logic. We can have, you'll see, that we can have a decision procedure actually by translating that to automaton. Nobody in his right mind would use a proof system, right? So, okay, now we go to an example, and I'm sorry that here I had to use the yellow color because this corresponds to this traffic light, and these are the colors. Now, for those of you who have the book, in the book there are two examples. One is a simpler example where it goes between green, yellow, and red. There's no second yellow between red and green, okay? And there is an error in the book, which you'll be able to recognize after we do this example. I kind of oversimplified things, and there was an error in the original book. Therefore, there was an error in the Chinese version. And in fact, I only recognized that error when I gave a lecture about that, standing right here 5 or 6 years ago. Suddenly, in the middle of the lecture, I figured out I had an error in my slides, and I went back to the Chinese version, the English version error. Sorry. Okay. So there is an error, and you figure out kind of the book is correct about this example, but it kind of because the other example is simpler, then kind of I just was too quick about not finding it. Okay, so I want to specify that traffic light. Okay, how am I going to do that? What do I have to write? What are the correct things about the traffic light? What can you say about the traffic light? What is simple? About what kind of lights can you have? Right? There's only 3 lights, right? So in every state, it's either green or yellow or red.